Hello and welcome to a very special Earth Day edition of the Air and Space Live Chat. I'm Marty Kelsey, one of the hosts of STEM in 30, an Emmy-nominated TV show for students produced by the National Air and Space Museum. We just released an episode of STEM in 30 all about the Space Shuttle's 40th anniversary. It looks at the history of the shuttle, the people who flew it, and even has some hands-on experiments that you can try at home. We hope that you can take a look. As I said, today is our show on Earth Day, and we're going to be taking your questions. We want this to be your show. Let us know what questions you have for our experts, and let us know where you're watching from. We'll be doing shout-outs throughout the show. Also, since this is Earth Day, let us know in the comments section what you're doing to help the environment. Could be anything from picking up trash in your neighborhood, to turning off lights in a room that you're not in anymore, to advocating for dark skies in your area. So let's bring in our experts to talk about light pollution today. We've got Dr. Kimberly Arcand, a NASA visualization scientist at the Smithsonian Astrophysical Observatory, who also works on the Chandra XRay Observatory. Valentina Alaasam, a Ph.D. candidate in ecology, evolution, and conservation biology at the University of Nevada, Reno. And Rosalía Lugo, who is the team's program manager at the Adler Planetarium. Thank you all so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
This is going to be a fun conversation because none of our guests have ever met each other today, so they might get a chance to ask each other questions, which I'm really excited about. So to get us started today, I want to ask each of you to tell us what your job is and what does it have to do with light pollution. Kimberly, let's start with you.
Sure. So I've been working in astronomy for I guess about 22, 23 years now. And my job essentially is to work on data. So I'm a visualization scientist for NASA's Chandra X-ray Observatory. Chandra studies X-ray light, so up above our atmosphere, because one of our atmosphere's sort of superpowers is to be able to protect Earth from X-ray light and other types of light as well. But just because I am working on data of the universe out there at large doesn't mean that I'm not also very, very interested in what's happening here on Earth. And honestly, I feel like so many people in astronomy, when you start studying the universe, it's like a natural self-reflection to be able to just turn everything back around and look at what's happening on your own planet as well. So I actually did not see the Milky Way with my own eyes until I was in my 30s. I grew up in a pretty typical corner of New England, relatively like low suburban population. And even though I had probably some skies in my state or in my town that I could have seen the Milky Way, it wouldn't have been really perhaps bright enough for me to notice it. So it wasn't until I went into like northern Maine when I was in my 30s that I got to see the Milky Way for myself. And that was just an eye-opening moment that I had gone that long. So the types of data sets that I get to work on are things like exploding stars or areas around black holes. And you can see when you're looking at these objects that it takes many different kinds of light to be able to really study and then visualize these objects in different ways. So on the screen right now, for example, is the Cassiopeia A supernova remnant, and we're looking at it primarily in X-ray light with a little bit of optical light. But other studies of this object bring it into a three-dimensional form, which you're probably seeing on your screen now. And in order to kind of extrapolate all that sciencey goodness out of the data, you need more than just X-ray light, you need infrared light, and you need optical light as well. And this particular 3D model that we worked on with Tracy Delaney of MIT at the time actually includes two different data sets from ground-based observatories. So even though X-ray light is caught and captured above our atmosphere, we still need the context of optical data taken from our planet here on Earth in order to sort of, again, extrapolate all of that great scientific information. So that's it in a nutshell.
I love sciencey goodness. I love that saying. That's going in my vocabulary starting today.
Great.
Valentina, how about you?
Yeah, so I'm a PhD student at the University of Nevada, Reno. I've been, I'm in like my fourth year of my PhD, and my dissertation is about light pollution. So I'm really interested in how light pollution affects specifically birds. For my research, I work with these little birds called zebra finches, and we use them. Yeah, there they are. This is a male. They have these like really cute little orange cheek patches. And these are actually pet birds. So maybe some of you have like had them growing up. I know a lot of people who are like, oh yeah, my parents had those when I was a kid. But they're cute, and we use them to kind of understand how light pollution is affecting birds as a whole. They're a really good model organism because they're easy to have with us in the lab and at UNR. So yeah, this is me in our outdoor aviaries where we keep them and they let them breed and things. And the focus of my research is kind of on how light pollution affects animal physiology and behavior. So I study things like stress hormones and circadian rhythms, which birds have, but also humans have, and everything on Earth kind of has. Every kind of life has some kind of circadian rhythm that's entrained by light cues. And so I study how light pollution is disrupting those cues and kind of affecting behavior and physiology in animals. And yeah, broadly, like after my PhD, I will probably continue studying this. I think I've gotten really, really hyper-focused in light pollution and birds right now, but hopefully when I move forward, I'm going to be, I'm really interested in how light pollution is affecting ecosystems as a whole. So going into the environment, into cities and into forests and natural places that still get light pollution, and understanding how it's affecting the evolution and ecology of lots of different species.
Awesome. Rosalía, tell us about your job at the Adler Planetarium and how that affects light pollution, or how light pollution plays in.
Yeah, so I am a team program manager. I work with high school students. That's essentially what I do year round, but I do run a light pollution program specifically called Youth Organization for Lights Out. And so the photo that you're seeing is students doing some solar viewing at their high school. So it's definitely bringing the Adler to the school. And so the students are learning about what light pollution is, how it's affecting Chicago, and what are ways that you can change, you can reduce that at home. And so the students have gone to international dark sky trips. We've done presentations at Earth Fest. So today would have been a big day that we would have gone in person if we were at the Adler. We've also done teaching other students, just like in this picture, about loss of the night and the Globe at Night app. And so taking students out to dark sky trips is what is empowering within this group, because a lot of the students have not seen what a dark sky more or less looks like, or more or less what a Milky Way looks. And so I think the next picture, yes, this is a picture that was taken by one of the students that we took to Middle Fork through his own camera of the Milky Way. And so it's empowering too. Just, this is a student's work, and we're able to show it, and all of you are able to see this. And then,
no, go ahead.
Sorry, and then Indiana Dunes, that's the first place that we took them that was the closest to Chicago. And what is great about this trip is that they also get to see the light pollution coming off of the city, so they can see the impact of what we're living in Chicago.
That's awesome. I've gotten a chance to see the Milky Way a few times. You know, I live near Washington, D.C. now. I used to live in Missouri, and we'd go down to near the Lake of the Ozarks. And actually, there's a picture that I took of the Milky Way, and seeing that for the first time. You know, I got a chance to go to the Grand Canyon, see that. That's the one that I took. But then we got a chance with STEM in 30 to go out to the deck of an aircraft carrier out in the middle of the ocean. And it was super dark except for the lights on the carrier. And my co-host Beth, we're standing there, we're watching these airplanes coming, these jets land, and sparks flying, and it's just absolutely stunning. And then you look up, and there's the Milky Way, and we're standing there, and Beth like wallops me on the shoulder because we're wearing this hearing protection, and she points up, and there goes the International Space Station passing over while we were on the deck of a carrier watching the planes come in and land. It was absolutely stunning. So if you get a chance to get out to some place with dark skies and see the Milky Way, that is awesome. And that kind of leads to our next question. There aren't a lot of in-person activities happening right now. What are some things that people can do at home to see the night sky, even if they're in a place where there is a lot of light pollution? Who wants to start? Rosalía, you want to take that one?
I can go, just based off of what the students have been working on. So like I mentioned, there's different apps that you can still check out. Loss of the Night is one where you can download it on your phone. It is Android and iPhone friendly. And so what you're doing essentially is helping it's a citizen science project. And so you're helping us see if we can actually look at a night sky or not, if we can actually see a star or not, excuse me. So typically we would want it to be like on a clear night, but also it's data that's happening year round. So that's one way to go outside, take out your phone, and you're essentially following the arrow that is asking you to locate a certain star. So that's one way to do it. And that's also, again, informing just global citizen scientists on this project that you can just do right at home.
Awesome. All right. Well, we've got folks tuning in from Florida, Bangladesh, and Mexico. Let us know where you're watching from in the comments section. We would love to give you a shout out. As a matter of fact, Adler Planetarium, located in Kingston, North Carolina, is tuning in. Thank you all so much for watching. Let us know where you're watching from. And if you like this show, give us a share on Facebook to let other people know about it and come in and ask their questions as well. And what I think is really fun about this panel today is we can ask about animals, you can ask about data, you can ask about how you can get involved, and we've got experts to answer those questions. So please let us know where you're watching from and what your questions are. Kimberly, you work a lot with data. Does the weather affect using data to look at the night sky?
Oh, sure. So again, the data that I primarily work with is going to be X-ray light, which we're gathering from the Chandra Observatory, which goes a third of the way to the moon. But as I mentioned, astronomy is actually a very holistic area of study when it comes to different kinds of light and different kinds of information more broadly than just light as well. And so for that, you need to be able to use ground-based observatories here on Earth. And of course, for that, weather is 100% important. That's part of the reason that many ground-based observatories, optical observatories, have to go to higher altitudes and also to escape light pollution as well. So it really is a whole idea of being able to, as an astronomer, kind of use whichever tool in your toolbox is necessary to answer those questions that you're asking.
Awesome. All right. We've got Oregon, Michigan, and Colorado all tuning in. Valentina, the next question's for you. Are all animals affected by light pollution like birds?
That's a good question. Yeah, they're not actually. And one of the things I'm really interested in is how they're all differently affected, because there are some things that I think a lot of animals share, and even plants, which is that we all have circadian rhythms. And so a lot of organisms have mechanisms of perceiving light and then use those cues to know when it's daytime and nighttime and when they should be awake and when they should be asleep, feeding or migrating or all those things. But the interesting thing is that all different kinds of life have different ways of perceiving the light. So they have different visual systems, and even within the same visual system, there's different life strategies. So there's like nocturnal animals and diurnal animals, and that's a really good example. Like, I think nocturnal animals are probably affected much differently when there's light pollution when they're awake during the night, and are usually adapted to like eating and feeding and doing their daily business in darkness. And now they have all this light, so a lot of them are actually maybe benefiting from that, maybe not. And then diurnal animals are sleeping, but so then diurnal animals have an effect of like disruption of their sleep and maybe chronic stress from being awake too much. But every time, I think in this field, there's so many people studying different types of plants and animals and different organisms, and the effects are so diverse. It's pretty overwhelming actually to think about like all the different ways animals are responding differently.
Well, we had a follow-up to that. Somebody wants to know about plants. Are plants affected by light pollution?
Oh yeah, and this is really cool because I don't study plants at all, so of course I find it the most fascinating. But plants are one of the kinds of organisms. It's actually the most obvious when you think about it that they would be affected, because we know about photosynthesis, right? We've been learning since kindergarten that plants have all this really cool machinery for absorbing light and turning it into sugar and just living off light, basically light and water. So actually in agriculture, people have been studying how different colors of light can affect the growth of different plants, and the way that they pollinate or the way that they reproduce and things like that. So what's really interesting is that, yeah, plants, the color of light makes a big difference too, and they have different photoreceptors for responding to like shadow, like the blue lights that come out of shadows versus red lights, and knowing which way to turn. So light actually, they respond to light to actually move and face the light like sunflowers do. And so definitely a big effect on plants. Not my specialty, but a lot of interesting stuff there.
That's amazing. Kimberly, I saw you shaking your head as well about the plants.
Oh, yeah. So I actually started out in biology many, many, many moons ago, pun intended, I guess, before I transferred into astronomy. And I've always found it interesting just how much of the organisms on our planet rely on that sort of diurnal life cycle or cycle that they were talking about. And this idea that it's not just, a cultural issue or not being able to access the night sky. It's not just the idea that light pollution leads to wasted money, as far as like really big electric bills we don't need to be paying, but also how many different organisms can be directly affected from the overuse of light when we just really don't need it the way I think people think that we need it. So
yeah, and it's cool to think about plants because they're a lot of like plants are the bottom of these food webs, right? Or these interaction networks. So when some things like plants or insects are responding to light pollution, it's actually having cascading effects all the way up. So the insects that eat those plants are then changing their behavior to match their food sources or their habitat sources. And then the birds who eat those insects are changing their behavior to match that. And that's why you see a lot of diverse effects, because it kind of depends on not only how you're seeing the light or receiving the light for plants, but like, what are you eating and how are they perceiving the light pollution?
It really shows how interconnected everything is. All right, we've got another question here. Are there any places in the world where light pollution is going down or getting better?
There's definitely, I know some cities have adopted some pretty cool progressive night sky strategies where they're turning off lights in certain areas or at certain times of day, but it's not a lot of cities, unfortunately, that I've heard of. I don't know about anyone else.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Rosalía. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah. So right now in Chicago, there's been some Chicago light changes that part of, YOLO is to also bring that advocacy. And so what does that look like? Right now they have done research on city council, like how is that run in our city and what are ways that we can actually educate them to be able to change some policies. And so I think it's a work in progress. If your city isn't doing it, check to see if there's a light city ordinance or not. Chicago doesn't have one, and we are currently working with a lawyer to be able to hopefully facilitate something like this. But next week, the students are going to be presenting to other students on their findings within the city council and what's important to them as far as like when you should be turning off your lights. How do you communicate with your here in Chicago, your alder representative or city council. And so if your city doesn't have it, if you don't know, it's definitely important for you to do that research and just check city light ordinance in your town or city.
I know I've got one street light on my block that just kills me whenever I go outside to try to look at something. And actually, I want to encourage everybody tonight or tomorrow morning, especially if you live on the East Coast and further south on the East Coast, great time to go outside. We've got a meteor shower happening, as well as at, I think, 5:48 tomorrow morning, we've got a rocket launch with 4 humans going into space to the International Space Station, and that'll be visible for a pretty good chunk of the East Coast. So I encourage you not only get out tomorrow night, or tonight and tomorrow morning, but anytime. We've got the Netherlands, Louisiana, Washington State, California, New York, and North Carolina all tuning in. And I've got a little bit of a technical question that's come in, but I think it's pretty interesting. Can filters be applied to outdoor lighting to filter out a range of wavelengths so that digital telescopes can see darkness? What range of wavelengths should be filtered out?
That's an interesting question. I would say there actually is a lot that you can do with your lighting, like everybody was talking about earlier, to help reduce the light pollution issue. I think it's really important to consider light pollution as just a human-made problem that we can take actionable steps on at many, many different levels. Like we were saying before, whether it's something at the town level, the city level, or at the individual level, like you can try to help affect change. So I guess my recommendation would be less about filtering on a telescope and a little bit more specific to seeing what's around you in the environment that you're trying to observe. Really, I think it's critical to try to do a few things. One, if there are areas of like light trespass, where light is coming in really strongly in an area that it's not needed, if it's going up or sideways, not in an area in a way to protect something or to make something safe to walk on or any of that, that would be an issue to be able to work on, to see if there was a way to reduce the light trespass, or if there's a real strong like over illuminated area, for example, too. But then again, it's also paying attention to the wattage. I think a lot of times people get confused when transitioning from the more traditional bulbs to the newer bulbs, and that change from wattage to lumens. Everybody can get confused with that, and being able to realize that you can go lighter with the lumens as to the numbers that you are used to in watts. It's pretty easy to swap that out. And then also getting to your question of the different kinds of light, like blue light and that really bright white light, for example, those are the ones that we want to try to reduce at night, because they just travel so much farther and so much easier. So if you're in an area where you can reduce your blue light use, for example, with your bulbs on your various buildings or in the area around you, you can also do that as well. But at that, by trying to take action, those small actionable steps around you, you can try to help improve it for everybody versus trying to fix a problem just on the telescope, which is technically a lot more difficult.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just going to follow up with that because it's a similar story with the animals and plants and things. Like, definitely, I think the best thing we can do is just turn down the lights, turn off the lights. There has been a lot of research, though, that shows the bluer hues, the short wavelength, or the very white lights have the most severe effects on organisms. And that's true for a lot of organisms, including humans, but it's definitely not the rule. And I think people, it's really easy because it is kind of helpful for humans. And a lot of people have those blue light glasses now to help with the screen time and all that. But there's a lot of organisms out there that still are being affected, even if you kind of change the wavelengths, especially insects. And probably plants who will respond no matter what, and even if the lights are redder or yellower. And so I think, yeah, just dimming them is probably like the best thing to do, and just reduce the overall light pollution in the environment.
Cool.
No,
please go.
And I just based off of that, right, and the advocacy, I encourage you all to look outside of your street and to see like the shielding of what's around you, because that's also a big part. So if you have like the big circle that looks like an ornament, it's illuminating up, it's going to impact the birds, right, and other animals that are flying versus the 45 degree that should be lit more, right? So. And
Kimberly, you mentioned light trespass. Can you tell us what that means?
Yeah, light trespass is essentially when light falls like unintentionally somewhere it's not supposed to, where it's either not wanted or it's not needed. And I actually have a couple examples of light trespass on my own property, where there is couple of very, very bright spotlights that are, I think, meant to help like animals, the owners of the animals, so they can see the animals as they're going outside at night for the pets. But then they end up brightening up entire yards. So light trespass on a small scale can be relatively easy to fix, again, as everybody else has already mentioned, through just reducing the total amount of energy that you really don't need, directing it where it really does need to go, and shielding it if it doesn't need to go anywhere more than just straight down. And I know a lot of people are also really concerned about safety, and that is 100% a valid concern. But what's really interesting about light trespass and like over illumination and overly bright lights is that it can sometimes do more harm than good, because having really bright light doesn't necessarily make anything safer. It's really hard for your eyes to adapt to quick changes. So if you're outside and you move into a zone that's overly flooded with light, you can actually be less aware of your surroundings visually than if you're in an area that was just properly lighted with like a dimmer kind of softer diffuse light pointing just down. So I know there's lots of concerns about safety, as there should be, but there's some fascinating studies that show how much safer we can be if we reduce our light in the right direction, and just overall just pay more attention to lighting only where you need it versus over lighting everything.
Awesome. Rosalía, you sent us a picture that we'll pull up, and it's got red lights in it. We've got some folks watching who aren't, experienced night sky watchers. Why the red light?
Just what Dr. Kimberly just mentioned, right? It's the light adjustment. And so it allows the students to actually, and we're encouraging them not to turn on their flashlights on their phones, and everybody gets a red flashlight because it's easier for us to see at night. So your eyes actually adjust to darkness. And so being able to have the red light, it makes it easier for us to see like who's around and a little bit further away versus having your phone flashlight and now you're trying to adjust the lighting. That's going to take you a lot longer to do that. So that's why all the students, and I big encourager of like carry a red flashlight, even just have it in your car. If you go camping, like I have one, definitely in my car, just in case.
And they're kind of cool. If you go out somewhere and you want to look at a star map, or a lot of times I will look at the passes at the International Space Station. Having that red light, man, allows you to read that and look at the times and the altitudes and everything. But then also it doesn't mess up your night vision, which is awesome. And I do want to encourage everybody, if you go to, we'll put it down in the comments section. We have a great video about how to spot the station from your backyard. And it's really easy, and it involves your fist. If you hold your fist out at the end of your arm, that's about 10 degrees from the bottom to the top. And you can count up how the altitude that the space station will be passing over. It gives you a great opportunity to see it. And I'm guessing in your area, because it varies throughout time, but you'll have an opportunity to see the space station pass over. And if you haven't done that yet, it's something you definitely should do. We've got another question here. Does the world still do the dark sky hour for Earth Day? And does that really have an effect?
Do they still do it? I don't know about it.
So the last I heard, yes, it's still being done. I try to participate in it every year. I'm one of those weirdos that like follow my family around the house, like shutting off every light after they moved out of a room. I'm very strange. But yeah, I really do like the idea of that light pollution can be something that we can all have an effect on. And yes, it's super important to think big and to really work to get like some of the over bright areas of, say, a stadium, or even like outdoor tourism that doesn't need to be lit up as bright all the time. Those are going to be areas that might be a little bit harder for an individual to have an impact on. And those super bright areas are, of course, very important overall. But I think, again, what's interesting about light pollution is that we all have some agency to be able to work on there. And there are so many fascinating success stories about people that have helped sea turtles down in Florida by reducing light, about dark sky parks that have been created, about towns that can go dark at night at certain times, for example, about reducing the amount of lights on the Eiffel Tower at a certain time of night, about changing street lights out, and all of these smaller changes that can happen. And when they all start to happen over time, can have such a big, big impact. So I think the idea of the Lights Out campaign is really important. That Earth Hour is very important for just being able to help establish awareness, because I am not a light pollution expert. I'm a student of it. I'm someone that's fascinated by it and passionate about it. And I think that's something that we can all try to help contribute to.
Awesome.
Yeah, and seeing,
go for it, and then I'll go.
I was just going to say, we've got folks from Texas, Arkansas, and Virginia. Let us know where you're watching from. We'll give you a shout out. We've got a few minutes left. Rosalía, go ahead.
I was going to say, in addition to the hour, we have International Dark Sky Week, which is typically in the first week of April around. So this year it was April 5th to the 12th. And so taking a look at their website and seeing what people around the world are actually doing during that Dark Sky Week is also a way to just be informed as far as like your location. And it's not just that one day, it's, how to sustain that knowledge as well.
Awesome.
Yeah,
and go for it, Valentina.
Sorry. I was just going to add, like, we have to remember that even though just the 1 hour might not have a big ecological effect, it does have a big effect in that a lot of people don't have access to seeing night skies at all and haven't. And so it is really important to maybe if we all do our part just for that 1 hour, give people a chance to even see the night sky, see stars and the Milky Way for an hour. Because a lot of us, I mean, if you have access to it, if you have access to the outdoors, or you've grown up camping, or you live kind of far away, it's important to remember that that's a sort of privilege. And most of us have grown up in cities where it's just not even possible, and you don't even know the potential of what you could be seeing. So definitely a huge advocate for the turn off the lights and let us all see it, so that we can be motivated to make changes in our daily lives.
Awesome. So Rosalía, somebody would like you to repeat the app that you mentioned earlier for helping them out to find stuff at night.
Yeah, so it's Loss of the Night. I didn't send a picture just because it didn't come, but it's an owl. It's a purple owl. That one is on the phone, and then there's a web app as well that I briefly mentioned called Globe at Night. And that one is, you print out a piece of paper. You can do it with your little one or anyone, and you're essentially trying to see what you can see based on the constellation. And it's done monthly for Globe at Night. And then Loss of the Night, the one that was asked for, you can do it at any time.
Awesome. Kimberly, do you have any resources that you like for folks at home to use?
Actually, Globe at Night is probably my favorite. And I do actually go to the International Dark Skies website, the IDA website as well, quite a bit. So I would recommend both of those. And there are also some great apps for just finding your way through the night sky too, in general. You can look through the various app stores for those, and they're really fun to be able to spend time with your family figuring out where things are, because even if you're in the central part of the city, there are some beautiful things to see. Our moon, of course, is a classic favorite, and there are some fantastic planets to be able to see as well, and other objects that you can still see. And that's, I think, an important step too, just taking advantage of the beautiful night sky that we do still have access to, and just trying to, I guess, regain as much of that sort of situational knowledge of our universe that we've had for many generations.
And if you're looking for dark sky in your area, you can Google dark sky maps. We've got an image of my local area, and you can see that near Washington, D.C., it's not a great place to have a lot of dark sky. The white dot is Washington, D.C., and the one above it is Baltimore. And so for me to really get dark sky, I've got to drive about an hour and a half over to Shenandoah National Park. And I did that last year when there was a comet that you could see for a few days, and it was absolutely awesome to go over there and be able to see the night sky and see that comet. Valentina, do you have any resources that you could share with us as well?
I don't have a lot. I think the dark sky is a good one, and yeah, just I think there's a lot of apps out there these days that I would use. But
sounds good. All right, we've got another question here. Is there any work going on with car manufacturers? It seems like all the new cars have really bright headlights at night.
That's interesting. I don't know if anyone in the car manufacturing industry is aware of their effects on light pollution and is doing anything about it.
I don't know either. I would hope so.
I feel like it's kind of like what we were talking about earlier, is that there's this perception that the brighter the light, the safer we are. But in reality, it can be the opposite. And so it actually might be better to like have dimmer lights and have our eyes adjust a little bit more. And I know when I'm on the road and it's very, very bright on the actual street, I can't see anything like 2 feet off the road. I can't see it all because my eyes are so adjusted to this bright light. And so I miss the deers that's like sitting there and waiting to cross. So I don't know, this could be a whole new area of innovation that somebody should look into.
Awesome. So if you're watching and you have anything to do with car manufacturing, let us know, either what's going on or how we can maybe help with that. We've only got time for one more question. I kind of want to go around the room here. And if folks could do one thing to help with light pollution, what would you say? Rosalía, let's start with you.
I would say definitely turn off your lights. Light pollution is the easiest, right, quote unquote, pollution to get rid of. And also just close your curtains. A lot of that times as well is it makes a little difference. If you can't turn off the light at your house, just close that curtain at night that you don't need outside.
Awesome. Valentina?
Closing a curtain is a really, really good one. I think that's something people forget about because you forget when you're inside you don't realize how much light is actually escaping the buildings. And so that goes for those big, tall buildings that people work in late at night when you're pulling all-nighters in the office. Just shut the blinds, and it makes a huge difference. And then the second thing I think to add is people have a lot of power they don't realize. If you talk to your local officials, your local governments, and tell them that this is a problem and that you would feel cool with a little bit less light in your cities. I know, like here in Reno, it's just flashing lights everywhere, but we do have power. There's power in our voices and in numbers. So just talk to your officials and see what you can do as a city to reduce the overall impact.
Kimberly, how about you?
Yeah, I think Rosalía and Valentina both said it really beautifully. I think we all have some individual agency to be able to reduce light in our own homes, in our own buildings, perhaps, those outdoor lights that are on our houses or on the buildings that we live in. If there's any way to reduce them, to make sure they're pointing downwards, to make sure the light is not excessive, to make sure they're just shielded from reflecting up. Those are small things to do, but really so important is to talk to people about it. I think light pollution is something that perhaps people just don't think about a lot, and it's something that is eminently solvable. This is something that is very much in our power to have some effect on or some impact on. So talking about it, using your voice, and trying to help others figure things out, I think it would just be incredibly valuable to be able to do that.
Awesome. Well, thank you three for joining us today. We had a great talk with a lot of sciencey goodness going on. Again, that's going to be part of my vocabulary. My team is going to hate that going forward, but that's going to come up a lot. Thank you all so much. And I want to remind everybody that if you missed any of today's chat or any of our previous live chats, you can go over to the STEM in 30 Facebook page or the National Air and Space Museum's YouTube channel to check out the archives of all of our live chats. You can also catch the latest episode of STEM in 30 on the Space Shuttle's 40th anniversary. It looks at the history of the shuttle, the people who flew it, and even has some hands-on experiments that you can try at home. And we hope that you tune in next week. We have a great program celebrating 60 years of American human spaceflight. We have a NASA historian, a space shuttle astronaut, and his son to kind of give the human side of that story, as well as the chief flight director of human spaceflight at NASA. You can tune in and ask your questions about any phase of American spaceflight. We're really looking forward to that program. And if you enjoyed this program, be sure to give STEM in 30 a follow on Facebook and Twitter, and subscribe to the National Air and Space Museum's YouTube channel. Valentina, Kimberly, and Rosalía, thank you all so much for joining us today. And for everybody that was really active in the comments today, we appreciate it, and we hope to see you again soon. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.